on World News Tonight. Threat of war. Vladimir Putin announces partial mobilization of troops in an escalation in its conflict with Ukraine. Political malpractice. Largest COVID fraud scheme was reported as millions of dollars have been stolen from hungry children. Robot debut. The Tesla robot is set for release, but Elon Musk faces skepticism prior to the debut. And prep for the holidays. Chinese theme parks upgrade their activities to a whole new level to welcome the holiday season.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here is Suzanne Shanali.
A very good evening and thank you for joining us on World News Tonight. Now, our top story today is on Russian President Vladimir Putin ordering a partial military mobilization as Moscow's troops battle a Ukrainian counteroffensive. Speaking in a televised address to the nation, Putin said only those currently in the military reserve or who have had prior military experience will be drafted. We have Derana World News special correspondent Malsha Patiraja, who joins us now from Kursk in Russia for more details. Malsha, over to you.
Yes, Shanali. Russia's defense minister says mobilization decree will see additional personnel called up to serve in Ukraine. Minister Sergei Shoigu has said Putin's decree on partial mobilizations will see 300,000 additional personnel called up to serve in the country's armed forces. The announcement comes a day after Russian-occupied regions in eastern and southern Ukraine moved closer to holding annexation referendums. This prompted many international responses from both Russia's allies and rivals. The United States ambassador to Ukraine says Russia has shown weakness by announcing a mobilization of its military reserves and pressing ahead with plans to stage sham referenda in occupied parts of Ukraine. The United Kingdom's defense minister says Putin's mobilization of reserve troops signals on admissions that his invasion is failing. China's foreign ministry urged all parties to the conflict to engage in dialogue and find a way to address their individual security concerns after Putin warned the West over what he described as nuclear blackmail. The announcements have received swift support from Russian politicians. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has publicly endorsed a referendum in the self-declared Donbas republics, saying it will have a huge significance for systemic protection of the residents, citing that not one future leader of Russia or official will be able to reverse these decisions. Back to you, Shanali.
All right, thank you. That was Derana World News special correspondent Malsha Patiraja reporting from Kursk in Russia. An ally of President Vladimir Putin has supported plans by Moscow-backed separatists in Ukraine to hold referendums that could pave the way for the annexation of swaths of areas. Washington said that it would reject any such referendums.
Officials in parts of Ukraine controlled by Russian forces, including the two breakaway regions, the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, signaled on Tuesday that they're moving forward with referendum votes that would allow them to be annexed by Russia. And if that happened, Russia's President Putin would essentially be daring the West to risk a direct military confrontation between them, a conflict that U.S. President Biden has previously warned would be World War III. This was the aftermath of what was said to be a Ukrainian artillery strike in the Luhansk region Tuesday. Children's school was reportedly damaged. The referendums in Luhansk and Donetsk will start on the 23rd and last 5 days. A top Putin ally, the former president Dmitry Medvedev, says he favors the move. If the Russian allied forces here make the areas formally part of Russia, that will be a serious escalation for Moscow against the U.S. and its allies. It's because, according to Medvedev, if the areas become formally part of Russia, then anyone attacking the areas is attacking Russia itself, and it's legally entitled to self-defense, an apparent future warning. So far, the West has been careful not to supply Ukraine with weapons that could be used to shell Russian territory. Meanwhile, Ukraine's government says the threat of referendums is, quote, naive blackmail, and a sign Russia is running scared, and Ukraine's military is continuing to report advances against Russia. A provincial governor has said Ukrainian troops are preparing to retake all of Luhansk. On Monday, Ukraine's President Zelensky said speed was of the essence, and that, quote, the occupiers are clearly in a panic. Combined, the referendum areas in question are about 15% of Ukrainian territory, an area the size of Portugal, and comes 8 years after Russia annexed Crimea.
World leaders gathered in person at the 77th United Nations General Assembly in New York City. The war in Ukraine and other mounting global issues topped the agenda for 150 heads of state and government attending the meeting.
In a wide-ranging address to the UN General Assembly, the UN chief reiterated the need for developed countries to impose an extra tax on the profits of fossil fuel firms. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres added Tuesday that the funds should then be directed to countries affected by climate change, as well as households struggling with the cost of living crisis. He also warned that the world is in, quote, great peril and paralyzed. He explained that countries were not ready or willing to tackle the major challenges that threaten the future of humanity and the fate of the planet. However, the UN chief did highlight that there is hope, calling for cooperation and dialogue among countries. Among mounting challenges facing the world, the war in Ukraine looks like dominating this week's UN General Assembly meeting, which has global leaders gathered in person for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic. Leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, slammed Russia, saying that since its invasion of Ukraine, the world has returned to the age of imperialism and colonialism. As Western powers are hoping to use the gathering to convince neutral states to apply more pressure on Moscow, Macron also urged fence-sitters to wake up.
I know that there are countries here that have chosen a form of neutrality in relation to this war, but I want to tell you with honesty today, those who think they are aligned are wrong. They are making a historic error.
The president of Brazil called for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. He stressed that a solution can only be reached through dialogue rather than unilateral sanctions against Russia.
The solution to the conflict in Ukraine will only be achieved through negotiation and dialogue. I make a plea to the parties as well as to the entire international community. Let us not miss any opportunity to end the conflict and ensure peace.
The Turkish leader called for a diplomatic solution that gives Russia and Ukraine a, quote, dignified way out of the crisis sparked by Moscow's invasion. He called on the international community to find a reasonably practical diplomatic solution to end the war, adding that his country will continue to increase its efforts to that end.
Over in the US, 47 people face charges in what the DOJ is calling the biggest theft of COVID pandemic relief money ever. The money was supposed to help feed children in need, but instead was stolen and used to purchase luxury goods.
Prosecutors called it a staggering fraud, the theft of nearly $250 million tax dollars intended to feed hungry children, instead being used to buy cars, houses, and jewelry.
The scheme that began with a simple idea in March of 2020 grew to become the largest pandemic fraud in the United States.
47 people now face charges, including conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and bribery. The government alleging defendants connected to nonprofits and restaurants collected taxpayer money through federal nutrition programs.
Their goal was to make as much money for themselves as they could.
At the center of the indictments and appearing in court today, Amy Bach, founder of the nonprofit Feeding Our Future. Prosecutors say she was overseeing a massive fraud scheme. They say her organization recruited others to set up federally funded meal sites during COVID while oversight rules were relaxed. Soon, hundreds of sites in Minnesota were reporting giving out thousands of meals a day, but prosecutors say it was a fraud.
More than 125 million fake meals are at issue in this case.
Bach, whose organization the DOJ says received more than $18 million in administrative fees, pleaded not guilty today. Kevin Chambers leads the Justice Department's COVID fraud enforcement efforts and says this case stands out because the money was meant for children.
Where the money went instead were to purchases of hyper luxury vehicles, sports cars, real estate in Turkey and in Kenya, which I don't have to tell you has nothing to do with getting kids fed here in Minnesota.
The U.S. judge appointed to comb through some 11,000 documents seized by federal agents from Donald Trump's home as part of a criminal probe questioned the former president's attorney over the claim the records have been declassified.
The U.S. judge appointed to review documents seized last month by the FBI from Donald Trump's home pressed the former president's lawyers in a hearing Tuesday about whether they had any evidence that Trump had, as he had publicly claimed, declassified some or all of the records at the center of the case. Tuesday marked the first public hearing before Judge Raymond Dearie, who was appointed to serve as what's known as a special master or independent overseer to decide if any of the 11,000 documents found by federal agents executing a search warrant at Trump's Mar-a-Lago, Florida resort should be off limits to investigators. Trump is under investigation for illegally retaining government records, some marked as highly classified. He has denied wrongdoing and claimed without evidence that the investigation is politically motivated.
And now the unprecedented weaponization of the Justice Department and the FBI to break into and raid the home of a former president of the United States.
The former president has also claimed in social media posts he had declassified the records, but his attorneys have made no such statement in court filings. And when asked by Judge Dearie for evidence of that declassification, Trump's attorneys on Tuesday argued that such a request went beyond the scope of the special master's appointment. Judge Dearie said he was, quote, taken aback by that claim, and added, quote, I think I'm doing what I'm told. Dearie will recommend to the U.S. District Judge presiding over the fight over the seized documents whether any of them fall under attorney-client privilege or executive privilege, a principle that allows presidents to withhold certain information. The Justice Department has argued the appointment of the special master was unnecessary and is appealing part of the district judge's order prohibiting investigators from reviewing some of the seized materials while Judge Dearie reads through them. The August FBI search came after Trump left office with government documents and did not return them, despite numerous requests and a subpoena.
Let's go into a short commercial break. We'll be back soon with more world news. Welcome back to World News Tonight. Now, migrants who have been flown to Martha's Vineyard are suing Florida's governor, while a sheriff is now launching a criminal investigation. This comes as there has been a new record of migrants that has been crossing borders.
Tonight, the battle over the border is building, with a new criminal investigation examining the flights that carried 48 migrants to Martha's Vineyard last week. The controversial move arranged by Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. A Texas sheriff, Javier Salazar, a Democrat, says the migrants were lured in with false promises of work and assistance.
Our understanding is that a Venezuelan migrant was paid what we would call a bird dog fee to recruit approximately 50 migrants.
Some of the migrants now suing Florida officials.
None of them knew that they were going to be dropped off unceremoniously in Martha's Vineyard.
They were provided an ability to be in the most posh sanctuary jurisdiction.
DeSantis insists the migrants knew where the flights were going and signed consent forms, and that it puts the spotlight on President Biden's border policies, which Republicans blame for the record migrant surge.
If 50 was a burden on one of the richest places in our country, what about all these other communities that have been overrun with hundreds or thousands?
The Department of Homeland Security now confirming there have been more than 2 million illegal border crossings in just the last 11 months, smashing all previous records.
Italy's right-wing bloc looks set to win a majority in both houses of parliament in next Sunday's election. Giorgia Meloni, leader of the Nationalist Brothers of Italy, is seen as the frontrunner to become Italy's first female prime minister as Italians head to the polls.
Italy is going to the polls on Sunday after Prime Minister Mario Draghi's national unity government was brought down by party infighting in July. Here's what you need to know about the upcoming elections. Who are the main parties and personalities? Polls have consistently shown the country's right-wing bloc will win a majority in both houses of parliament. Giorgia Meloni, leader of the Nationalist Brothers of Italy, is seen as front-runner to become the nation's first female prime minister. The former far-right activist from Rome has energized her party, which is set to see its share of the vote leap to around 25% from only 4% at the last election in 2018. Her party is widely expected to emerge as Italy's largest single party at Sunday's vote and lead an alliance of right-wing parties to a comfortable victory. The Conservative bloc also includes the League Party, led by Matteo Salvini, and Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia. Salvini is the abrasive former interior minister who takes a hard line on immigration. In recent months, he has been eclipsed by Meloni. Berlusconi, who will turn 86 4 days after the election, has shrugged off old age, ill health, sex scandals, and a criminal conviction. The 4-times prime minister is battling for a central role after the vote, even if his party is the junior partner now among its 3 main parties. Italy's electoral system favors groups able to form broad alliances, likely amplifying the right-wing bloc's victory. The right has also been helped by division in the centre-left. There, attempts to form a broad electoral alliance by the main Democratic Party, led by former Prime Minister Enrico Letta, fell apart. That leaves 3 main groups fighting for votes: the PD and its allies, the centrist Azioni Party, and the anti-establishment 5-Star Movement. Led by Giuseppe Conte, the 5-Star Movement withdrew support for Draghi's government in July, sparking divisions that led to this early election. His strategy has in part been vindicated by an improvement in 5-Star's poll standings, but the party still faces a spell in opposition. And what are the main issues for voters? As in other European countries, the cost of living crisis has overshadowed other concerns such as immigration, crime, and public services. The Conservative Alliance has called for tax cuts across the board to help Italians cope with rising prices. The Democratic Party wants tax reductions to be more targeted towards lower-income groups. Meloni has repeatedly voiced her support for Western policy against Russia after it invaded Ukraine. But League leader Matteo Salvini has called for the European Union to shield Italians from the economic side effects of sanctions imposed on Russia over the invasion. Polls are open from 7 a.m. local time on Sunday.
At its AI Day, Tesla is to unveil a prototype of humanoid robot known as Tesla Bot or Optimus, according to CEO Elon Musk, but experts are skeptical that it can show technological advances that would justify its expense.
4 years ago, Tesla chief executive Elon Musk blamed over-reliance on factory robots for putting the electric car maker in, quote, production hell, saying humans were better at certain jobs. But apparently, times have changed. Tesla is now floating ambitious plans to deploy thousands of humanoid robots, known as Tesla Bots or Optimus, within its factories, expanding eventually to millions around the world, according to job postings. On September 30th, at its AI Day, Tesla will unveil a prototype of Optimus, production of which could start next year. Initially, Optimus will perform boring or dangerous jobs, including moving parts around factories, according to Musk. But he added that Tesla plans to leverage its AI expertise to develop and produce smart yet less expensive humanoid robots at scale, including ones for homes that can make dinner, mow the lawn, and, yes, even become romantic partners. Musk has also gone so far as to say that the robot business eventually may be worth more than Tesla's car revenue. But robotics experts are skeptical about Musk's plans for widespread use of humanoid robots. They have been in development for decades by Honda and Hyundai's Boston Dynamics unit, and like self-driving cars, have trouble with unpredictable situations. One expert told that to succeed, Tesla will need to show robots doing multiple, unscripted actions. For now, analysts see more pageant than product, with one telling, quote, "It's all part of distracting people and giving them the next shiny object to chase after."
Welcome back to World News Tonight, and for more news, let's take you around the world in a minute. Kyiv residents braved the cold to line up for hours as McDonald's opened 3 branches in the Ukrainian capital that had been shut since the Russian invasion began. PepsiCo has stopped making Pepsi, 7-Up and Mountain Dew in Russia nearly 6 months after it said that it would suspend sales and production over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. UK and Japan's PM agreed on the importance of democracies working together, including through international institutions such as the G7, to constrain economic and security threats from authoritarian regimes. And that is all the news we got for you tonight. Join us again tomorrow for more news around the globe. And just in case you couldn't watch any of the stories we aired tonight, you can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/otherderana-English. We are leaving you tonight with theme parks around China, introducing a number of limited entertainment activities ahead of the expected tourist peak. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe and have a good night.